So in the reading corner today, I'm joined by Emily Gravett. We've talked to Emily before, but in relation to her illustration of Locked Out Lily. And today we're going to mainly be talking about picture books. Before we start, Emily, I know that we've chatted on a number of occasions, but I've never really delved into your past, and I was really interested to read that both of your parents were very artistic. I think your mum was a teacher and your dad was a printmaker.
That's right, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up with two very creative parents and whether you think that rubbed off on you.
Oh, it definitely rubbed off on me. I think they valued like artiness above academic subjects. So they never really sort of got upset with me if I didn't do well at school. And also because my dad was a printmaker, but his day job, he was the technician in the printmaking department at Brighton Polytechnic. And so I had access to the printmaking room at the college as a child. So we could do stuff like go in and print Christmas cards, and he'd let me use the big guillotine that slices up the zinc for the etching plates and all that kind of. I can't remember how to do any of it now, but it was lots of art materials around. And when we were kids, we would draw on the back of his old prints. And my mum, when I was a bit older, she was an art teacher. My arty ability comes from her more than my dad's, because my dad's very abstract and it's all about shape and colour, whereas my mum is all about character. So when she was 70, I got her a stone carving course for her birthday. And she's 84 now. She's been stone carving ever since. And she makes these amazing animals, and she puts a lot of character into things. And I always think that actually that's where I get my illustration style from, is the fact that she's always drawing little animals doing things and all that kind of stuff.
That's so interesting, because it's the characterfulness of your books that literally leaps off the page. You were very fortunate in going to a school that was supportive of you as well. I was also interested in the books that have been formative for you. And you mentioned John Vernon Lord, The Giant's Jam Sandwich.
Yes.
And also Stick of the Dump and the illustration by Ardizoni.
Yeah.
Both of those artists are really well known for their drawing, and they belong to an era where drawing was so important. How important is that to you now as an illustrator?
Oh, it's really important. I think drawing it's a kind of language, and it's a character, and everybody's is so individual that when people don't draw, it's fine because everybody can illustrate whatever way they like. But when things aren't drawn, I always find it slightly disappointing, because you're not really seeing that character come out about the illustrator so much. I love drawing, and I like the way it feels too. You can sort of see how somebody felt when they drew a picture, and I can't see that in any other format.
I wanted to read you a quotation actually from John Vernon Lloyd, because when I read this, I thought of you. So I'd love to know what you think. The whiteness of the paper already exists before you proceed to draw. It has established itself as a fundamental entity, a ground to tread on. What marks you make on the paper are as important as the marks you don't make. Or is the opposite the case? The editing and selection of gap making is fundamental to drawing. Nothingness, therefore, allows something else to exist. What do you make of that?
He's completely right, isn't he? I mean, it's always about the white spaces, so it's about the gap in between. And that's not just true of the actual image, that's true of picture books, isn't it? What we're working with is gaps. We're working with children's imaginations and knowledge. It's not really about what we've done, it's about what we've left out, or what the child is going to make of what they see put together in that space in their head.
You are somebody that allows pictures to breathe. And I actually think when Wolves came out, it felt very different at that time. And I think it was to do with the amount of white space that you had in the book.
It did, didn't it? And it sort of stood out, didn't it, when you saw it in a bookshop? And I don't know why either, really, because now we've seen so many other picture books come out, and you just think, well, it's not that different, really. Because at the time, I didn't think it would be published anyway. So it wasn't a consideration that it might look different, because it was a uni project. So I didn't worry about it. that was more accidental than anything else. It's just how I wanted it to be and what I had the time constraints to do.
Always the best thing, not to
happy accident, really,
not to be led by what we think is needed.
Yeah.
But coming to cats, I think there's a nice link to that, because again, it's a book that has, I think it is a plain background and everything is placed onto that background, but we're not distracted by landscape and other things. It's a concept book, but not one concept. You've managed to get two concepts in there. We've got counting and we've got colour.
Yes. It was just after Eric Carle died, and I think I was asked for a quote about what had been special about him, and I was just thinking it was just the joyful simplicity of his books. And I was trying to come up with, I'm always trying to come up with an idea for a book. It's really impossible. And I just thought, I just want to make something that's simple and joyful and doesn't have to have too many underlying complications or messages or anything else in it. I just want to make something that is fun to read, fun to draw. So that's why I came up with the concept of it.
And yet it's not like one of the concept books where there's no story to it. It's incredibly engaging. So we have a mother cat and 9 kittens. When you were drawing 9 kittens, did they have separate kittenalities or personalities?
In this case, not overly. They were more of a kind of mass, and it's just the colours really that differentiated them. I tell you, after I'd come up with the idea, Polly Dunbar's cat had kittens, and she was sending me photographs of them. Well, one of them is very much like hers. So it was quite good for me to be able to see the way they moved and stuff. One of them always gets a bit sort of left behind, but there's not one that's particularly much shyer than the others. They're all quite rambunctious, which is the thing that's very nice about kittens, really, isn't it? They're a very pleasing shape, and they come in lots of different colours. They're just fun. And in fact, this strangely doesn't go with my book dogs, because I've done one that does go with this that's coming next, which is 10 dogs.
And interesting that you mentioned Polly there, another illustrator who's so good at the white space.
She's really good at it, yeah.
I also want to talk to you about another relatively new book, which is Too Much Stuff. And I suppose one of the things that I really love about your storytelling, this could be a book that we think has a strong moral to it, but somehow that isn't how it comes across. Basically, we have 2 magpies that steal things. Tell us about it from your point of view.
It's almost a follow-on book I did a book called Tidy that was about Badger that was a bit over-tidy in the woods. And I wanted to go back to the woods because I think it's my age, but I really like drawing trees now. So I wanted to go back to the wood. And I came up with these magpies. And of course, magpies steal things. And I just thought it would be funny if they just stole a lot of stuff. And as I was going through, I realised they're a bit like, I don't steal a lot of stuff, by the way. I don't do that. But I do seem to have a lot of stuff. And I thought, actually, this is becoming about something else, really. I don't like books that stuff a moral down your throat. I find it painful, pedantic. And so I'm glad that you say that it doesn't come across too much like that, which is always the danger when you find that actually you thought you weren't doing a book with a moral and then you find you've got one anyway. Well,
actually, the magpies they are taking other people's stuff, but they're also taking stuff that's been thrown away, like old teddy bears and things, and making use of them.
They don't have morals, they're magpies.
Exactly. And that's what magpies are supposed to do. Let's talk about the end papers. There's something different going on with the one at the end and the one at the beginning. This sort of takes us back a little bit to Little Mouse's Big Book of Tears and the found materials that you have in that book. When did it strike you that this was going to be a great thing to have for the end paper? Did it come right at the end?
No, I think it must have come fairly near the beginning, because I immediately knew that they had to have some idea for why they wanted that stuff. I mean, they steal stuff, but the stuff that they do steal is quite ridiculous. And I thought it would be quite nice to have a hint of what was going to happen. And I like end papers that help add to the story or are a bit silly in some way. And I also really like designing packaging and magazines and, you know, all those things that could be real, but they're not, which makes them more fun.
So this has got an aged feel.
Yeah.
I'm looking at that card.
But actually, no, that car is my car.
Is it? It's got a very flash modern car.
I've got rid of that car now, but that car was really special because I've had 4 identical cars, all from 1984.
The style of the advert looks up earlier.
Yeah, I think because actually when you start looking at magazine adverts, that was the last sort of era that adverts were drawn.
Of course.
So it needs to look slightly different to the rest of the book, but at the same time, I don't want something that's as jarring as having photographs. Yeah.
And everything that's in these adverts, people will spot in the things that the magpies collect. So we've got what looks like this wonderful Silver Cross pram, you know, the very old style, although they're back in, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, very fashionable. I don't know how anyone's got a hallway big enough to put one in, but...
And well, I certainly don't, that's for sure. And these kind of old style teddy bears with the arms that move. But when we come to the end paper at the back, I love the jokes there because it's full of useless adverts, basically, isn't it?
Yeah, it's basically, it's well, as are the front ones, really. You know, all this stuff is not that great. And then at the back, you just see that actually it was all rubbish anyway, really. You've got your chocolate teapot and your roller skates with your square wheels on, but it's very fun thinking up those adverts.
I can imagine. I'm sure you had great fun playing with that. And the fish that needs armbands to swim, and the duck that needs the umbrella. And then just at the end, a little bit about recycle, reuse, the 4 R's.
I agree with it, though.
Tell me a little bit about this fascination with trees. And your trees are very stylized, but there are a range of trees there. So can I spot an oak tree? Are you looking at the basic characteristics and representing them, or just showing a range of trees?
Yeah, I'm not showing specific trees, mainly because I'm actually not very good at telling. I'm getting better at telling the trees from each other, but I think it's more the overall feel of the wood and the colours and the way that things change throughout the seasons. And that, you know, that feeling when you walk under a big canopy of leaves in spring and they're acid green and the light shines through them. And I don't know whether I don't think I've captured that at all, but that's what I was trying to do. And the same in tidy in autumn when everything starts to just change colour. And it's more of I'm trying to capture a feeling, basically, of being in a wood.
The other thing that I really like, again, maybe it reminds me of my childhood reading. I love your insects, your ladybirds, your beetles. And there's something about these really tiny things that you've given life to in these stories. Are you fascinated by insects?
Yeah, I know nothing about them. I keep trying to come up with an idea for a book just with them as the characters, and I haven't found one that really zings yet. But I hope I will, because they're really nice to draw, and they're in dual colours, and so they're really attractive. I mean, the hardest thing about them is to make them appealing in a kind of like I think that publishers generally like cute characters. Well,
do you know, I remember Peter Horacek doing a book about the fly, and everybody saying that a fly couldn't make a good story, but I liked it, although I noticed that's one of his that's not in print, whereas all the bears and, you know, they're still in print. Yeah. So I've got this page here, which is everything coming tumbling down out of the nest, because eventually they put a huge car on top of everything else that they've collected, the bicycles, the mop and the bucket, the cuckoo clocks. But the car proves to be a little bit too much and everything comes tumbling down. What a fantastic, dynamic illustration this is. I'd just like to know a little bit about how all of this gets put together.
Well, it's generally a bit like a collage, so quite separately. So I tend to draw all of the items individually or in small groups, and then scan them in and use Photoshop like a collage, really collage them all together. And I had lots of roughs worked out about pretty much where everything was going to go, but then it always gets a little bit more complicated when you actually get to the finished piece, of course, which is annoying. And I stupidly chose lots of things that are really difficult to draw at different angles, falling upside down.
Do you ever draw with models, or is it all out of your head?
I did buy a toy car, Morris Minor, so that I could rotate it, because I just couldn't get the angles right, because it's quite a, they're quite a complex car anyway, that style of car, it's got a lot of curves in. And I was trying to turn it in my head through all the angles with photographs of different sides of the car, because I couldn't find a real one. And in the end, I just bought a little model. I
love the fact that you had to show us the engine as well. Great.
I don't know whether that would be a fully functioning engine if you're a mechanic. I think there would be some things wrong with it, possibly. It's got a big battery, though.
So one of the things on this page is that not only is it very dynamic because of the falling objects, but we've obviously got that mirrored in the text placement as well, which is all at odd angles.
Yeah.
I know designers obviously have a role to play in this, but was this part of your idea?
Yeah, well? I'd always intended the text to do this, and we tried it out another way as well, because it's fine to play with text, but not for the sake of it. We were a bit worried that it wouldn't work, but actually it sort of does, I think, on this page. So got away with that one, which is nice.
Talking about your picture books and the history of them, you said the further back in time they are, the more I like them.
When they're quite close still, you're caught up in the emotion of them, and you remember all the things that you were trying to do with it that you didn't quite achieve, the stuff that you didn't get in there, or the drawing that is not that great, and you really notice all that stuff. And the further away that gets from you, kind of like Wolves, I really like it. It's really badly drawn, but now I'm that far away from it. But I really think the concept is great. And I'm quite surprised it's mine, really, because I appreciate it now. I didn't used to like Meerkat Mail at all, and I've come around to that one now as well. So that's good. But that was years ago. For me, they're quite emotional, the books, and they're always caught up in how I was feeling when I did it, whether I was in a good place, whether I was enjoying it, how difficult it was to think of, or whether once I got going it went smooth. All of these things get caught up in it, but once they're back into history, that worked better for me. So I tend to like them more as time goes on.
I just want to press you on something that you've said about it was badly drawn. When I look at it, I don't think that.
That's probably a bad choice of words. I think it probably is not how I draw it anymore. But in the same way, it would have been a worse book if I'd done it now. If somebody said, I'm giving you the text, you can play with it if you want, but you have to redraw it, it would be a worse book. It would be slicker, because I've drawn every day pretty much for the last 17 years. I'm more confident with my drawing now. I'm also a lot better at using Photoshop than I was when I did Wolves. And that sort of shows through, there's a kind of grubbiness to Wolves, which I wouldn't have now. And, and I think as an illustrator, you beat yourself up constantly anyway, constantly doubting your own abilities and where you're going with things and where you've been, which is another reason why you quite like the things that were in the past.
A while ago, when we talked, you were at that point exclusively a picture book maker and really illustrating your own text. But since then, you've gone on to illustrate books for A F Harrold, Nick Lake, and J.K. Rowling. I wondered whether that had brought anything new and whether you've learned anything from that experience that feeds back into the picture books, or are they completely separate?
There's probably a bit of both. They are quite separate. I think, in a way, doing somebody else's book feels like a bit of a pressure off time. I'm normally doing somebody else's book and one of my own at the same time, and I'll do a few days of each during a week. But it feels like the other people's books, there's less pressure because I don't have to write it. And there's more pressure in that other people have more of a say in it somehow. They're all been lovely, every author I've worked with and every editor I've worked with, but you sort of feel like you're trying to please somebody else. So that's different. But being able to just use black and white, that's absolutely fantastic. You don't have to make so many decisions. I'm not deciding this because it's in black and white. I know it's in black and white. The only decision I'm making is what material I'm going to use. Am I going to use ink? I've just done another Nick Lake book and I used wax crayon for the whole thing. Really stupid decision, but I enjoyed it. But they're really unsubtle wax crayons. So it's like, oh, I'm trying to get any kind of detail in with a wax crayon was.
So the obvious question I have to ask you is why?
Why the wax?
So why did you make that decision?
It's got like a witch in it, and it's got a black cat, and I kept drawing them with pencils and trying with ink washes, and they were too precise somehow. They looked too pinned down, and I didn't want them to be pinned down. I was trying to think about it in a slightly different way. I think, like when you're doing older fiction, all the words are there and you're adding the illustrations. And trying to find that gap is more difficult. When you've got a picture book, you can leave these big gaps. But when it's an older fiction, I just feel like I'm sometimes just reproducing what's on the written page, and I don't like that. So I'm trying to add something, and I was trying to add sort of too much. And I thought maybe it'd be better if you just paired it back the other way and add less and make the drawings really ethereal and not quite as pinned down. So with using a wax crayon, I don't have the control anyway. So it's frustrating because I don't have the control, but that's what I was trying to achieve in the first place. I
find that really fascinating. Essentially, you're going after a mood or a feeling or an apprehension of some kind.
Exactly. That's what you're trying. That's what I'm trying to do with older fiction, and often failing. So it's a challenge, which is exciting.
It's interesting. Chris Wormel, who's obviously a fantastic picture book creator like yourself, has gone on to illustrate his Dark Materials. And he's so passionate about printmaking and art that comes through your hand rather than on the screen and the photoshopping and everything. But he had to change his practice because of the speed with which he had to work on this huge book. Yeah. And so it prompted him into trying new things that have now become, I suppose, part of his repertoire and what he can draw on. And I wonder, with a project like the Quidditch book, did you have to approach it differently?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I had a year, and basically that year I was doing a black and white book, or maybe it's the Nick Lake book as well, and I was doing a picture book. So I just worked every day. I didn't have a day off. And the beginning, they were saying, "Oh, send us roughs," and then I just thought, no, I can't work like that. It's too stressful. So I would just get up every morning, and I would think, right, I'm going to do I'm in chapter 7, and I would open the page, read ahead, go, oh, I could draw that, put a Post-it note in, and then just do the thing that day, which is fantastic. Or think, oh, I need to buy some. I don't know, some cloth patches, or I need to buy some old vintage badges, or I need to get some old magazines or whatever, and then scour eBay, get them all sent. And then the next week I go, right, okay, I'm doing a magazine article on blah, 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 or whatever. So it'll be scanning stuff in. So that was completely different because nothing was really planned apart from the chapter headers, which gave it more cohesive look. And so I had to learn the new techniques every day. So it didn't get boring at all because I had it was like a mini project every day, but they're all connected together.
So you've done novels and a book that doesn't have a narrative in it, the Quidditch book, and your own picture books. Is there any other format that you've not worked in that you would like to work in?
I don't know. This is the thing. I'm very unimaginative when it comes to thinking what I would like to do. Hence the fact that it takes me so long to come up with every new idea that I just don't have this big list like some people do, which I'm very jealous of them. So the Quidditch one, I really ummed and ahed about doing it because I thought maybe this isn't it's a book about sport for a start. But I think sometimes having something presented to you, which on one level is not that interesting to you, gives you this opportunity.
We've got 10 dogs to look forward to. We've obviously got the illustration of the new Nick Lake book to look forward to. So thanks so much for joining me in the Reading Corner today, Emily.
Oh, thank you. It's been really nice. I really enjoyed it.
In the Reading Corner is presented by Nikki Gamble and produced by Alison Hughes. This episode is generously sponsored by Macmillan Children's Books. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review. If you would like to find out about other events and courses, visit justimagine.co.uk. Join us again in the Reading Corner on your favourite podcast platform.